So now I'm going to introduce our amazing keynote speaker before I pass it over to her. So the keynote today is going to be presented by Jane. She has had quite an eventful career journey. She started her career as an Earth space engineer, managing satellite links before climbing onto top leadership positions at big companies like Ericsson, Nokia, MTN, and now Meta. She's the author of the bestseller book, Be Fearless, Give Yourself Permission to Be You. Jane also co-founded International Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineers, Women in Engineering in Nigeria, and she's also the founder of Women and Careers. At Blix, we're very big on knowledge exchange, so it's a great privilege to have Jane today share her knowledge and experience with our audience and the Blix community. I will now pass it on to you, Jane. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thanks. It's amazing to be here. I can already feel the warmth and the energy. So Maria will be working with me today as we talk, but I'm looking forward to having this session with you. If you could put up the slides, please, Maria. Thank you. We're going to start with that. And I have an interesting topic today. And I titled today's topic, a call to sit at the table. And I'm sure you'll be wondering, what has this got to do with the theme? Because I'm like, the theme is break the bias, but no, just stay with me. Stay with me. Three things I would like you to consider before I continue is one, that, even though I'm really going to be focusing about gender-based bias in our discussions, it's not only based on gender. There are all forms of biases out there. So let's just be aware of that. And the second thing is that we also all fall into these bias traps. So I'm not even absolved. The important thing is that what are we doing about it, which is the third thing I'm going to be talking about. It's not all about awareness and talk. I think there should be action as well. So with that, let's move into the session. Maria, ta-da, the next slide. Thank you. Now there'll be questions, especially those of you that might be expecting a gift. Really have a good look at this picture, because I'm going to be asking you a question. So when you look at this picture, what do you see? Because I think, because when I was putting this together, I'm like, when I say, a call for a seat at the table, sit at the table, I'm thinking maybe most people will be thinking about this image. You can look at it, everybody gathered, you see people like you, some men, some women, Just put your eyes there, pay attention. If you move to the next slide. Thank you. In reality, that is how most times the table looks. When I say call to the seat at the table, when you're trying to make it for that decision-making room, where decisions are made, where influence and impact is created, where leadership sits, most times, probably this is how the table looks. If you can put into the chat box what you think was the difference between this picture and the earlier picture Maria showed, I would love to see your answers. Just give me an idea, one or two. What do you think was the difference between this picture and the earlier picture?
Should we speak up or write it on the chat?
Oh no, just put it on the chat. Don't worry, you don't have to speak. I want to see what people are saying, Someone said the first had balanced gender. Yeah. Someone said good picture, or second picture, all male. Looking for one more. There are no females in the second. The women were not active. Thank you. And I think most of you are getting a bit of it. So I'll say that two big things. So someone said, the first picture did have gender balance. So they were right. There were females and there were males. So most times when you talk about, you're going to try and make it for leadership, you're aiming for those rooms where you can feel influenced. We always think that those rooms will look like us. In reality, the rooms look like this picture. Most times it doesn't look like anybody like us is in that room. And one part I wanted to point at, most times there is no seat. Even when you're invited to the room, you get called to participate, you get called to be part of that room, there might be no seat for you. So in this second picture, if you notice, there was no seat. And that's how sometimes it shows up. So you have to learn to bring your own seat. You have to come prepared with your own seat, not willing to complain that there was no seat, but to do something about it by bringing your own seats. So thank you guys. Thank you for those that really answered. So let's go into like talking more about the topic for today. And I wanted to start with a story. If you see that picture, that looks lovely, isn't it? People will be curious, what's that picture about? But I want to share with you one of the reasons I think, we should talk about having a seat at the table. This was about 10 years ago, being in management. We were seeking for candidates for a certain role. So we put up an advert and a lot of people, applied. We did the interviews as normal with most multinationals. When the interviews are over, the leadership seats, we go through the candidates that have gone through the loops and we discuss, it's more like just validating, everybody has scored and this is the outcome and this is the candidate and what we thought about it. And this particular time, the outcome showed that the candidate from everybody's rating was a female. Let's just pretend it's this female in red dress, because I still remember her wearing a red dress for that interview. So we're all talking about how, amazing what she did, what was the skill set. People were calling out different things. There are about 4 of us in the room. I was the only female. Then somebody said, "Oh, did she mention to you that she was engaged?" And people start echoing, yeah. She said she was engaged. That was the reason she wanted to relocate. Yeah. And all of a sudden, there was this awkward silence. You could feel it in the room. Things going through her mind. Someone re-echoed a bit of it. Oh, she's engaged. Oh, okay. Thinking of maybe getting married soon. And you know what happens? Having kids. And it's almost like everybody was like, maybe this is not the candidate. And I thought, in hindsight, because when it happened, initially I was taken aback and I'm like, what are we talking about? This was like the really strong candidate. And we are literally projecting her future. She told us she was going to be engaged, or she's engaged. We have now decided that she's going to get married. She would have kids. And we've assumed that because all that is going to happen, she wouldn't be able to deliver. And I didn't go, of course, busting in the room and screaming, "Hey guys, what are you doing?" I just tried to steer the conversation back. And I asked just open-ended questions like, what are we really looking for? And I go, what are the skill sets we want? What has it got to do with her lifestyle or her status? Just some open-ended questions. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay. The HR guy asked me, like as the recruiting manager, what did you think? I'm like, well, I'm really going for the skill set. Nobody's interested in, she's like, if it was a guy and he said he was going to get engaged, are we all going to get cold feet? I thought that was a teachable moment, and I wanted to share that because I thought about it because I was a woman in that room, and I knew how I have faced those kind of maternal bias. It was easy for me to pick it out and speak. Think about it. If there was no females or there was no woman in that room, I don't think that lady would have made it. I'm sure you want to know the end story. Well, we did offer her the job. She got it. We offered her the job, but she rejected it, but she got a better offer. But that's not the point. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that if we have more people, if we have more women in the room where these decisions are made, we could also probably reverse some of the biases, which is why we are facing extremely what we see today. If you move to the next slide, Maria, please. Thank you. 1. I call it 5-1. And in the tech industry, for every 5 men, there's just 1 woman. It means we still have a pipeline problem. Sometimes we think this pipeline problem is over. The problem is that the women just don't stay in the sector. We don't have a way of keeping them, and they don't make it to leadership. Even all the way from acquisition in the pipeline, we don't have enough females. And you might think that, oh, it's just for some certain kinds of companies. Maria, if you move to the next slide, I just thought we'd throw some data out there. I work for Meta. Look at it. Those are the top big tech companies we have now, at least as we call them, the GAFAMs. They still fall within the range of 20-23% in terms of the amount of women they have compared to men. And they have massive budgets, and they're creating massive awareness about diversity and inclusion, and they still haven't figured out how to fix it. Please move to the next slide. So I thought we should, go back to the basics and ask ourselves, like, what is really bias? What really is bias to you? When you think about bias, what do you think of? Mara, if you could please move to the next slide. I would like you to read those prompts I have there. Can you see yourself in any one of them? Ever occurred to you? You can just type a yes or no, that's fine in the chat box. Do you think any of those things have ever happened to you? Just check it. Oh, someone said yeah. Well, I put them there because there are two concepts I wanted to introduce before we talk about biases, then we can move on. But just this concept of microaggression. And I think a lot of women, is because it's normally you see that with minorities do face that. Those kind of day-to-day discriminations, they could go undetected. Normally towards people with lesser power, you see that a lot. And to be very frank, I see that happen to women a lot. Because when it happened to me, you even struggled to articulate what is going on. Because they're almost borderline disrespectful, because they're so subtle to pick off. And something else I wanted to talk about, if you go to the next slide, please, Maria, is what I've also realized, it actually even gets worse. If you have 2 or 3 other identities that are also minority based, like if you have a woman, first of all, so you do have the issue with the gender, then she is either Black or maybe Latino. It could 2 other identities. It could be that her sexual orientation, her religion, maybe her place of origin. Once they become 1 or 2 other, it just looks like the actual bias becomes really, really explosive and the impact is more. And we find that in most cases, you start to feel odd. Those types of people start to feel odd. So I thought I'd point this out because I felt those are the things that really aggravate the biases, which I will talk about in the next slide. Please, the next slide. Thank you very much. And like some of the things I was saying, most of us or some of us in the room would have, somehow, somewhere, faced some of these things. And to be very frank, we are not all also, absorbed from them. Like, I talk about unconscious bias there. I remember, and that's when you have stereotypes, and the stereotypes sometimes influence the decisions you make. So we all should be aware of it. It's not to say, oh, we are all experiencing bias, but we shouldn't also be the ones also creating or promoting bias. I remember a senior friend of mine, she's a lady, she wanted me to help her recruit for an executive assistant. And they sent me the CVs. I was like, all right, picked up all the good CVs. I checked and I marked all the ones I thought, let's interview these ones. They look really good. Then when the candidates started coming for in-person interviews, I remember when I think it was the second candidate came in, I was taken aback. He was male, he was a man. And, I had to ask myself, what is going on here? Because I did have that subconscious stereotype that men couldn't be executive assistant. That's the reality. So of course I didn't say it out loud, but I was having that conversation with myself, like, Jane, no, you should have been thinking like this. What are you looking for the skill set? So I did have that nice conversation with myself. But just to say that we're not all absorbed from it. But some of these biases do show up a lot with gender, especially women. Performance-based, we tend to see women as not as competent, or we tend to underestimate them. And sometimes it's more affinity-based, where, especially in leadership, we are all drawn to people that look like us, have our backgrounds. So you tend to see, especially when leadership is male, they tend to be drawn to people that look like them. I've had a coach tell me that he couldn't coach me because he's a guy. I thought that was absurd. But we do have that because, especially when you have senior positions that are mostly male, they tend to be drawn when it's time to mentor people like them. So we do have all these biases that have been thrown, the maternal bias, and I can't speak enough about it. Once we are seeing women get into motherhood, there's a tendency to believe and they're no longer interested or committed to their careers, or they're not competent. So all these biases are being thrown. And the reality is that I don't think they're going to be solved in our lifetime. That's what I've come to accept. I have been having these conversations for over a decade. And it's clear to me, I'm not saying we're not moving the needle, we are. But the chances that it's not going to be solved in our lifetime But that is not what we are talking about today. Please go to the next slide. What we're talking about today is that what are we going to do about it? And I thought this picture really paints a good image of what came to my mind. A voice. Use your voice. I want to recount what happened. I like telling stories. 2 days ago, I was telling my daughter that, oh, I'm going to be speaking at this International Women event. I'm going to be talking about this. I told her about the theme of the event. And she decided to recount the story, what happened. My daughter is 10. So they were playing basketball in school, and it was a mixed team, the boys and the girls mixed together. And they've discovered that in their team, the balls were being passed mostly amongst the men or amongst the boys, and they weren't passing it to the girls. And there was the impression that, don't give it to the girls, they won't be that aggressive as they wanted. So Maida, let's call her Maida, decided, she's female, one of the girls, that she wasn't going to take it. So she went to the teacher and had a conversation about, the boys are not sharing and are not passing the ball. I was so impressed. Like, these are 10-year-olds. And I thought that was one of the first things we should think about. It's not just talk about the bias. When you see it, please speak up. Speak up in the moment, especially if you're observing it happen. Because when you do, you're actually even empowering the person on the receiving end to be confident enough to question some of those things. And I'm learning to do that, I say that because I know sometimes earlier on in my career, it was like, it was scary. You're not too sure what to do. You just feel it's an uncomfortable, awkward moment. But I'm learning to, when you see it, you speak up in that moment. 2, ask probing questions. That's another way to call people out, is to really ask probing questions. Ask those questions that make people really examine and consider the way they're seeing things and how they're thinking. What makes you say that? Like, when people make those kind of remarks, oh, no, she's married, maybe we shouldn't be thinking about sending her to an international, job assignment. It's good to, just ask those probing questions, because when you do that, you're bringing them to really rethink and consider the comment they just made. Stick to the facts, because sometimes you almost want to take it personal, but I've learned to stick to the facts, call it, stay the facts, like, I've been doing these interviews, like what I was doing some interviews some months ago, and I realized, like, everybody in the pipeline was from one country. And I'm like, hey, we're doing these interviews for a region with over 40 countries, but everybody I've interviewed in this pipeline is from one country. So when you see those things, stick to the fact, because when you use the facts, I think people begin to follow the logic. Explain the bias, explain as much as you can, because it might be a teachable moment as well. I think that's one of the things you could do. And one of the things I've also realized is not to speak about it, let's advocate for policy change. If you see there's a need, maybe the policy or the process isn't right, you do advocate. Maybe we should look at the hiring process. Maybe we should look at this process for mentoring. It looks like we're only getting one gender or one, similar profiles. And there's something we're doing that is just gearing the whole, or skewing the selection process to just one profile. And finally, can you strive to sit at the table? I'm really, really making this a call to action. Because I think when we have more women in the room, it could be lonely, really lonely for the few ones that are there. And when I say strive to sit at the table, I'm not saying you have to be giving those titles, the CEO, the VP or the manager. In rooms where you feel that decisions are made and influence and impact can be created, if you're passionate, find your way there. Strive to be there, because you become the voice for not just you, for many other people following up behind you. And I want to say, I'm going to end this by the last slide. Don't worry, we're coming to the end. So for this is my call to action, because I thought, what's the use of talking and talking and talking? We're going to do something about it. I'm going to tell you a story again. Let's end with a story. I like telling stories. So I'm going to this speaking engagement. This was like, I don't know, 7 years ago in Ghana. I wouldn't mention the school. It was also an International Women's Day event. I was told to come and speak at it. So I was there, and halfway giving the speech, it was a long session. We're going to speak and have a panel. I was pressed. So I wanted to use the washroom. Interesting thing, it was the student union leadership that invited men. It was mostly men. There was literally only one woman in that leadership, and you can guess she was the financial secretary or something. So they gave me a female chaperone to take me to the washroom, but the female chaperone told me that the washroom There was no washroom for female students in the lecture area. We had to walk 20 minutes to the hostel area for a washroom. And this is me, I love heels. So I was wearing like 4-inch heel. And I'm like, this is not gonna work. Luckily, the head of department was a female, and she told me, you know what, not to worry, the lecturers or professors have their own private washroom. I could use hers. So as we were segueing and walking away to the bathroom, I was talking to my chaperone, which was a lady. So I was asking, this is interesting. I know that this school has been existing since 1960, and you don't have female washrooms in the lecture areas. And she's like, yeah, they don't have female washrooms. You know how it is, because it's mostly men in the leadership, in the student union. They don't really care. And I'm like, have you brought it up to them? Yeah, they have. They've tried, but maybe it's not the big issues they want to deal with. It's not part of those big issues. Exactly what I'm asking you to do today. So after I'd used the washroom, I went back. It was time for me to join the second session of the panel. And I got up and I asked all the student union leadership, and they all stood up. Mostly men, like I said, only one woman. And I asked the room, I said, I heard that there's going to be student union election in a couple of weeks. Any women vying for positions? When I mean positions, like some of the core positions, nobody raised their hands. And I said I wasn't going to speak until I see some hands up. And after a while, some women decided they were going to try. And I asked the men, the leadership, that I wanted to see who was willing to volunteer to sponsor these women and really guide them what it takes to vie for those positions. And a couple of them agreed. That was the only time I decided to continue the session. My ask for you today, what are you going to do? You've heard me talk about it. What is that one action you're going to do? What is that one change? It doesn't have to be big. It might just be, I have committed to do this going forward. And I would like to see you share with me that one thing you're going to do about it. Maria, I think we're meant to have a Mentimeter up there. Yes, if you could scan that, we would love to see what you want to share. What is that one thing you're going to commit to do? I don't want us to leave here. It's not another awareness session and Jane came to talk about biases and what they mean. That's not what I want. I want people to do things about it because I think that's when we create change. This is your call to action. Maria, are we checking? Edima, are we checking? Are we having any comments, any results?
Give me a second, we'll give it a minute and I'm going to check the results.
Okay. I would really love you guys because I think that is one way we can also feel empowered to know that we did something or we're part of the solution. I just love the commitment of the audience. So I think while we're doing that, I'm going to say thank you very much. I really appreciate the time. To the Blix team, Carl, Maria, Dima, you guys are doing an excellent job. I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to do this with you guys. And I want to say, if you want to stay connected, please feel free, reach out. I would love to stay connected with all of you, reach out. You can find me on any of the social media pages or LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I would love to connect with you. So that said, I'm going to hand over to Maria. Maria, over to you. Maybe you have the results, but yeah, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much, Jane. Just give us a minute. We'll access the result and show it to the audience.
Yeah.
Are you on the call now? Can you move to the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah, so here's how you can connect with Jen on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks so much, Jen. That was such an inspiring keynote. Very authentic, very honest. We want to have this kind of conversations, no throwing anything under the carpet, just being honest, authentic, because we have a lot of young women who aspire to be in positions like yourself. So it's really important that for me, to engage and have conversations like this, to know what the future holds for me, in my career. And I think I speak for a lot of young young ladies when I say that. So for me, one key action that I would take to break bias is to make sure that profile like yourself, like Liliana, who is on the panel, Corey, who's on the panel as well, and Lubna, to spotlight your success, spotlight your career, because you did, one of the key things I find is that when you don't have a role model, somebody to look up to, somebody to aspire to be, it becomes harder. And in your keynote, you did mention that we tend to gravitate towards people who look like us, you know, so when we have a lot more women like yourself who are tech executive, who are senior leaders in tech, who are in STEM, that just makes, inspires hope in a lot of us. So really great to hear you speak that. So we're gonna move straight forward to the panel discussion now. I'm not sure if Corey is on the call here. Sorry, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Edima. I'm the program and marketing leader here at Blix Network. And I will be moderating our chat today. Give me a second. Corey, please, can you say hello? I don't think I can hear you. All right, so going on to the panel. So I do have a couple of questions I'm going to ask our panelists there. So if you have any question or if you're wanting to ask specific questions to our panel, please use the chat to drop your questions there and we'll post them to our panelists later on.
Hey, Edima, it's Corey here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Awesome.
Great stuff.
All right, so just before we start, we have a great panel of leaders today and hoping to have a great and exciting conversation with you all and gain a lot of insight into your career journey and your key learnings. Just a quick disclaimer there. I know our panelists are here on professional capacity, but you should know that their views and opinion do not represent that of their employers and they're solely their own. So don't go quoting Meta or Google or anything from from our discussion today. We're really just here to learn from one another and grow. So quickly, would you guys, Lillian, Corey, and Lumna, could you give us a brief insight into your career, where you started, where you're now, like your current role, and also maybe share your thoughts a bit on Jane's keynote. I will start with you, Corey.
Yeah, hello, I'm Corey Hawkins and super excited to be here tonight. And Jane, thank you for an incredible keynote. I think just really personal reflections and I love the call to action at the end because I think that's the real power in these groups is holding us accountable and inspiring us to go out and make this change. So a little bit about my background. I'm head of customer engineering for UK and I at Google Cloud. I've got about 20 years experience in the industry. Started my career in Accenture in the US, and I'm now based in London. And that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, amazing. Over to you, Liliana.
Yes, thank you, Edima, and thank you, Jane, for an inspirational talk. So my background, originally from Colombia, and then I have been working in engineering for many years, too many that I want to admit. I had been working for mostly big multinationals as a sales engineer, and right now I work as a AI solutions architect at Peltarion and startup. But before that, I also worked for Google, Google Cloud, actually. Maybe before your time, Corey.
So, probably.
Yes. So a little bit about my career journey. I will say that it started with a career aptitude test that I took back in high school, where it looked out that I was very good with numbers, because what I actually wanted to start psychology, but after this career aptitude test showed that I was good with numbers, I said, well, maybe I should look at an engineering career. So that's how everything started. And since then, I have been very, very happy with what I'm working with. A little bit of a touch up on Jane's inspirational talk is that this unconscious bias is something that I really try to be conscious of, even though it is unconscious. You need to remember that sometimes you have this attitude towards people that you don't know. And just making aware of that, it makes you easier to pick up and stop and help everyone to be included. That's something that we pick up from the example.
Awesome. I like that. I like what both Curry and Leanne just said. Speak up. You know, the unconscious bias, sometimes it's there. It can, unless somebody points out to you, you wouldn't even know. And I love what Curry said is an action, a call to action, not just talking, but we get stuff done. Over to you, Luna.
Sorry, third time lucky. Jane, thank you so much for the incredible talk. I think all of your personal examples brought all of those concepts to life. So thank you very much for that. So I've had a bit about me. I have a very weird profile, not standard tech profile. So I all my studies were actually specialized in literature, art, philosophy, history, and then I, after my first degree, I wanted to work on things more concrete. And I remember when I was a kid, I was dreaming about having like a small device where I could watch TV and my parents not tell me, you know, you need to go to bed now. So I, after my literature, my studies that were more on the art side, I decided to join a business school that was specialized in technology and innovation, where I did 2 masters, so one around marketing and one around international business. And I then joined Intel, and I've been at Intel for 10 years. Started in Germany, then in France, then in the UK, and I recently moved in Switzerland. And I started working on the marketing side, working with independent software vendor, and then I did 6 years as an account exec looking after startups, enterprise, and then the last few years as global account manager. And for the past 2 years, I've been looking after our relationship with Amazon Web Services across EMEA, so very much a hybrid role across sales and marketing. And maybe one touch around bias for me, what was the sort of same idea that was present throughout, you know, the past 10 years is this idea or, you know, bias around, you know, women are not good candidates to be in sales, let alone in sales and in tech. So hopefully we'll be able to deconstruct that bias today. And I think, Jane, once again, it's very inspirational to see you in this position as well.
Yeah, thank you. I really love how your career transitioned from non-tech to now a very tech and then sales. That's awesome. Jen, Jen, please, could you share your story a little bit? Because I know from your background to where you are now, I am a huge fan. I cannot lie, you know, so.
So Corey, Lillian, Luna, you guys, like I was listening to you and I'm so impressed. Like I'm so happy for the panel. And in similar ways, I actually started in tech, as engineering, because I studied engineering and I did it for a different reason. I just overheard somebody saying it was difficult and I got interested, you know. And in hindsight, I realized I was probably more interested in the challenge. So I'm one of those ones that get driven by a challenge. So I studied engineering, and in terms of how I moved to sales, my first few years, like Maria had mentioned, I was a telecom engineer. So I was an earth station engineer. I was running the shifts with the guys, we're doing the roster and, 24 hours shift and all that. And I did love it. And my vision for my career was to really evolve in a very technical role. But I think 4 years in, I stumbled into sales. I always use the word stumble because it wasn't deliberate. I never saw myself, moving into sales. Other people saw it in me. So I ran a project. It was massively successful. And everybody was amazed at the skill sets I exhibited and thought, you'll make a good salesperson. And initially I thought, no, that's not, because I had my own impression of what salespeople are and who they are. But I think some people talked to me and I thought I'd give it a try. And that's how my journey started. And I haven't looked back since. And yeah, I hear you, Luna, when you say that sometimes there's the bias, because some people find it strange, when you walk into the room and, if they want to talk technical, you want to talk technical with them. And if they decide they want to talk business, we then share business. And they'll be like, wow, like you're smart. I didn't they make those remarks, like young lady, you're smart. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. I've been in the sector for 20 years. I don't know about the young lady part. But yes, I've been in the sector for 20 years, and mostly in the telecom sector. But a year ago, I pivoted and I moved into Meta, which is Facebook. And I now head their sales team in the Middle East and Africa for their mid-sized businesses. So that's a bit of my background.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just piggybacking from your keynote. You said we should use facts to speak up, and that's essentially when you use facts. And I believe that data would just trump some of those sentiments where people feel they are being accused. But once you show the data, it's like, this is what the information says. So my first question is, I did read a report from PwC, not dropping or naming names, about women in tech. Actually 2021 data that shows that there's a massive gender gap, that is emerging between women who choose to commit to a career in tech or women who want to choose a career in tech. So 40% of the women say they would want to pick a career in tech if they believe the career in tech was meaningful, if they were doing meaningful work. But compared to the men, which 44% of the men felt like salary was more important than, doing a job, than the job that they do. So going back to our society and that unconscious bias that we have, what technologies, Lillian and Lumna, are you working on at the moment that it's literally changing the world? Yeah, if I'm gonna say that, literally changing the world, just so that women can know that they can have a meaningful career in tech. They just don't need to do those care jobs, or women can only exhibit a certain kind of skill. That women can be very technical. They can also change the world, while developing a career in tech. And maybe Jen and Corey, you can share some important factors when considering a career in tech. Yeah. Lillian, you can go first.
Yeah, let me go first then. Yes, it is true. I think that we have heard a lot that there is this salary gap, and there is why women, we are not the ones that want to enter into the tech industry. They are afraid. So I would like to make two comments on that. One, and what kind of technologies are out there to help to close that gap, and second, when the PwC survey talks about a meaningful job. So for me, I will say that I found in sales engineering that meaningful job, that even though that is in tech, I feel that every time that I talk to an organization and every time that I listen to their business challenges, their roadblocks, I can help them with technology to overcome those roadblocks. And for me, that is very meaningful. So you can also can find that meaningfulness in tech, just to put it that way. For the second part, about technologies, well, I work in AI, and I will say that one of the reasons why it's a gender gap, gender pay gap, it, of course, is produced unconscious or conscious bias that had been in the past. So one way to overcome this challenge has been creating algorithms that by per se cannot differentiate if a candidate is a female or is coming from an underrepresented group or has this specific background. That could be doable. However, we have to be very particular to seeing that the data that we are using has to be unbiased first, because we cannot just take all the past learnings of the ways how we have been hiring or offering job offer, extending job offers to women and male and different groups in the past to train those algorithms, because the only thing that we are doing is amplifying the problem. So they are solutions, but they need to be curated, kind of like a clean up the past bias in order to work.
Also,
I think maybe Dima, to add on that, so when you were asking about examples of using tech for good, I have a million examples that come through mind. And even when I was, to give you an example, when I was in sales and global account manager, you're supposed to retire on your number. But actually, as Liliana said, when you work with organization, you look at the bigger picture. So to give you an example, when I was covering Rolls-Royce, I was sitting in the innovation lab, and the IT manager there told me, hey, I lost my dad to motor neuron disease 2 years ago. I've been approached by a professor of robotics, and let's see what we can do together. I know that Intel was involved in helping Professor Stephen Hawking when he had MND. What can we do together? And so we worked together on, so motor neuron disease is basically shuts down all of the neurons responsible for any motricity action. So that starts with movement, arms, legs, but then it affects your lungs, your capability to eat food, etc. So ultimately, you go from the stage where we can talk to a stage where you're not able to say any word. So you go from a stage where you are able to say 190 words per minute to a stage where you say 5 to 6 words per minute, because it takes time to use your eyes to write words. And so people with MND just end up being excluded, end up not wanting to engage in any conversation, and depression takes over. So what Intel worked on with Rolls-Royce was looking at how can we use natural language processing to enable the person with MND to be able to say more words per minute? How can we use NLP to ingest all of the data? So it could be books that professor wrote, it could be messaging, could be conversation, could be text message, could be emails that we wrote. How can we ingest that data so that the answers that will be proposed by the computer will be based on your personality? We all have our own way to reply, hey, how are you doing today? And if you're talking to the doctor, or if you're talking to your partner or friends, you'll have a different answer. So also using in this case, AI for good, using natural language processing to enable those people to keep their voice, to keep their personality, and being able to remain connected. And the third thing that we were doing as well is banking their voice. So instead of having a computer voice talking, you bank your voice. So you record your voice, and then all of the proposed answers are being read by your previous or your voice before you lose it. So that's one example. I have a few others, but I know that we are short in time, so I'm just going to stop there. But I just wanted to to share an example where I was in a sales position, so you're supposed to be there to earn money, but actually the project that we work on when you work on a big organization, and in tech always lead you to look at the big picture and use tech for good.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds like really cool technologies to work with. Corey, over to you. We share some factors we should consider when choosing a career path or thinking about what we want to do.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of echo what Lubana was just saying, it's actually, you could kind of look at it. So I'm an infrastructure geek. I started my career building data centers. I moved into migrating them. I now put servers in the cloud. And you can kind of just look at it as, yep, I install some tin that runs some processing for companies. And actually, the meaning is much beyond that. And actually, we've got a generational career defining opportunity to really transform how companies do business. And like recently I've been working with Unilever, which for those of you who may be familiar with Unilever and some of their brands, they manufacture ice creams and cleaning products and home goods, mayonnaise, and it kind of at the surface that doesn't seem like that inspiring of a thing, like, oh, helping an ice cream maker. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all love ice cream. But one of the things we worked with Unilever on was actually using Google satellite imagery to look at deforestation for their palm oil suppliers. And actually, Unilever is now able to go to their supply chain and hold them accountable for sustainable palm oil reducing deforestation. And kind of on the surface, like it's just some computing, but actually it ends up being so much more than that. And it's kind of finding those sorts of opportunities along the way is really what excites me, and excites me about technology.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. For me, I love business and technology because, like you mentioned, you can see the impact that it has in our everyday living. Although it sounds like it's something complex, very technical, but at the core of it, technology is just trying to help evolve humanity. So Jane, over to you. What are those factors you think we should consider when choosing a career path?
Okay, when choosing a career path, or when a woman is trying to be in tech,
Yeah, a woman is trying to be in tech, if a non-technical role, you want to transition to a tech role, what are those factors, things you would consider?
Putting everything we've said here in context, men aren't the bad guys. I wanted to say that because we know that we still have, because of the way the workforce has evolved, I think it's really been since post the industrial age, we started having women coming into the workforce. So it's been geared, or like we say, the rules have been created with men in mind. But it doesn't mean men are the bad guys. So I want people to go that in mind, because you don't want to go in already feeling either defeated or going there thinking you're going for a fight. That's a good perspective to go for. But I also want to say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to aim. Don't be afraid to reach high. Because you're a minority shouldn't weigh down on you and make you start to, sell yourself short. Because it is possible as a woman, getting into tech. Because what we've seen is that even though we even have less women, along the line, we even lose them, especially when motherhood and childbearing sets in. You start to see a lot of the women drop. But my take is that, the fact that you're a minority should not be the reason. I don't like the fact that people are leaving the workforce because you leave the workforce because you don't want to do that, not because you're a woman. That's, for me, should not be the reason. So don't let the fact that you're the minority or make you underestimate yourself, because we tend to do that as women. We talk about, especially in the tech sector, women wanting to be very overly prepared for a role, while we see that men, sometimes they're not even really there, but they seem to have that confidence to go for it. So please, I would say, the fact that you're a minority, don't please underestimate yourself. If you want for something, if you're that driven and you want it, you give it a try. Losing is part of the game. You might not get it the first time, but you might get it the second time. It's so important because we're seeing that you have, in terms of career growth, you see most women almost as if they're deliberately trying to slow down their own careers, trying not to aim or reach higher. And so many things I could say, because there's a tendency to hear all this information and then feel intimidated to get into tech. But please go after your passion. I think that's what should drive you, what you want to do, what you love. You should be driven by the fact that, oh, it's easier to do it here because there are more women, or I think it's tougher because there are less men. That should not be the criteria for you to choose or gauge or grow your career. I think what is really important is that you are driven by what you want to do, by your choices because you love it, you're curious enough, it challenges you. And if that's what is driving you, I think that's what brings fulfillment at the end. And if you do that, I don't think you'd be afraid to break stereotypes. Because if we take at that label, you would go for what you want to. So don't be afraid to break stereotypes. Don't be afraid to aim high. So I'm literally saying this because I want it to be the reverse. I don't want people saying they want to go to tech because of some of the things we've mentioned. I want people to go to tech so that we have more women represented and we make it easier for the younger generation. And one thing I could say, for any of you trying to go to tech or women trying to grow their careers in tech, a good thing to do, especially when you feel like you're a minority, is to get a mentor or to find a tribe. Getting support also helps. Getting a safe space where you can chat about things or let your head down like we say, makes it sometimes easier for you to deal with the challenges you might face.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love how you said, "Don't be afraid to aim high. Don't be afraid to break stereotype," which is something a lot of women, even people from ethnic minority background, tend to not say suffer from, tend to have as an issue, as a barrier. So I'm gonna come to you, Lubna. I recently found out there are two ideologies in terms of advancing career. So there are a group of people who aim for a role, who see a role and maybe don't have the experience, but think they have the potential, to play that role or to fulfill that job requirement. And then you have the second group or the second ideology where people tend to say, all right, let me first of all get an experience. Let me just get, some sort of maybe a short-term experience just to show someone that, oh, I can do it before they apply for the role. So in terms of those two ideologies, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that ties in nicely with what Jane was just saying in terms of imposter syndrome. And I think that's something that most women have. If I compare myself with my peers, if there is, the same job description, I will automatically feel like I need to nail all of the skills required and more. And, some of my male colleagues would be like, okay, I have 20% of the requirement nailed down. I'll go for it. Let's see how it goes. And I think we really need to change our own mindset around that. And I give you an example. So before, joining Team Amazon within Intel, so, I was mentioning that I was working as a salesperson within Intel. So my area of expertise and where I was very comfortable were client computing, on-premise solutions, edge Internet of Things solutions. And then this amazing opportunity came to work with cloud. And that was, where the cool kids are. But, when I looked at the job description, I felt like, maybe I should go through some, cloud solution architect training and do exactly what you said, Edima. Take it baby step by baby step until I feel more confident. And actually, I'm so thankful to my mentor at that time. And she was like, you're smart, you can learn on the job, just go for it. And that was, the best decision. I was like, I don't know where I'm getting into, and I'm sure I won't get the job. And I was like, I'm in the final 3. I'm in the final 2. I got the job. And it was almost, I couldn't believe it. And she was absolutely right. And yes, it was challenging because I had a lot to learn. But, you know, as Jane was saying, as long as you have the passion, as long as you have the drive within you, you know, there is no secret recipe to imposter syndrome. It's not like take it step by step. You need to put yourself in uncomfortable situation. And then, you know, you feel bad at the beginning, but you'll feel much better once you get the results.
Yeah, I love that. Put yourself in the situation, you either sink or you swim. So yeah,
Exactly.
I love the point. You piggyback from what Jane said, and what you've also mentioned is mentorship. So I'm gonna come over to you, Corey. So I'm not gonna, well, there's some data that show out there that 55% of women say that sponsorship or mentorship in particular sponsorship was impactful in their career. And I know we had an interview with you where you said that you feel a lot of women are more mentored and less sponsored. So please, could you share your thoughts on sponsorship and mentorship? Maybe just say what the differences are, because to be honest, I didn't know what these ideas were, especially sponsorship, until I started talking to senior leaders like yourself that brought this to my awareness. I know maybe one or two persons are on the call that may have questions like that.
Yeah, no, very happy to jump into that. And I'm going to pull my soapbox out in a second here, because actually, Lubana, I love that you were vulnerable and shared that story of you going for the role in cloud. And full disclosure, I found myself in exactly the same situation about 6 months ago. This role of head of customer engineering came in. It's a pre-sales role. I've already said my background is infrastructure. It's not engineering. My career has been spent in professional services and consulting and delivery. And I did that thing that women do, which is, oh, I'm not going to go for it because actually I don't have a sales background and I'm not an engineer. And, you know, and I started discounting myself out of it. And I caught myself. I was just like, you know what? If they tell me I don't get the role because I don't have a sales background and I'm not an engineer, they're not telling me anything I didn't know. And I went for it and I got the role and I'm loving it. It's a great role and it's a good step and I am prepared for it. And so I think it's really important to catch ourselves doing that, because I've been to a lot of these sessions and I know all the theory around it and I call it out in other people and I caught myself doing it. And I just think it's really, really important. So now I'll drag out my soapbox on mentoring and sponsoring. And there's really good, it's very Instagrammy, but there's a really good summary of this, which is basically a coach talks to you, a mentor talks with you, and a sponsor talks about you. And I think in a lot of these forums, we focus a lot on mentoring. It's like, oh, if only women had mentors, if they had someone they could look up to and see themselves in, that, you know, and learn from. And that is a huge part of the equation, but it's not everything, you know. And kind of going to this coach, mentor, sponsor model, you know, a coach will talk to you. They'll help you through situations and ask questions on next steps and kind of help you to put a plan of action together. You know, the mentor will talk with you and kind of impart their wisdom. You know, it's kind of a one-way relationship in some ways, you know, where you get someone a little bit more senior and a little bit more experienced talking through things. And sponsorship is really the key that unlocks a lot of these things. So sponsorship is where that magic happens, where you get someone senior going, I have an opportunity. And actually, I know someone who's really well suited for this opportunity, and let's line them up for it. And they, you know, they'll be that sponsor as you go through. And I think women are over mentored and under sponsored. And it's kind of, if you think about it real critically, who's talking about you when you're not in the room? Who's thinking about the next opportunities for you? Who's opening those doors? And yeah, so it's a challenging one, and it's one I don't think we've unlocked yet. And I think this is why these forums are super important. It's great to have some of the allies on the call as well, because, you know, these things aren't going to start changing and unlocking until we address some of that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing the difference between a coach, mentor, and sponsor. And like Jane said, bring your seat to the table. When you have your seat at the table, then we would have more women, speaking about other women as well, who are in their circle or outside their circle of influence. Liliana, I'm gonna come to you there. So have you had any situation where you maybe put your hands up or put yourself forward for a promotion or for a project and you were declined, saying, oh no, you can't? Because we know there's a data from we are Tech Women, an organization there in London that's really focused on promoting and elevating women in the tech sector, who say that a lot of women felt that their career was stunted, or should I say suffered, because of their gender. So yeah. And if you were in that situation, what would you do? How would you handle it?
Yeah. So I guess I also share similar stories like the ones that have been shared by Lubna and Corey. I once upon a time, of course, there was a possibility for a promotion, and the fact was that yes, I did raise my hand, and yes, I did get the promotion, but that wasn't the happy thing. I think there was a feeling that I waited too long. And I'm going to relate to everything that we are talking here. And I'm going to say, like, I put everything together and also trying to answer Diliana Gerenska. She put something on the chat very interesting that I relate to. The thing is, like, I also waited a little bit too long, or I wait too long to take that step, to take that, go after the things. So once you have all the skills, once you feel that you are looking, or I was looking at the promotion of the opportunities as a way that the only way for me to get it was to get in the experience. But I was forgetting that many of those leaders or many of these positions look at the potential. So you don't have to be filling all those check boxes. If you had experience that relate to the promotion of the job that you want to apply, it's just you have to put it out there. And as Corey put it very nicely, they are not going to tell you something that you are really feeling that, well, that I'm not prepared. Okay, good. But the feedback they're going to tell you is so wonderful, because then you know which areas you are falling short. So then you have only to focus on those areas instead of focusing maybe in the areas that you're already ready. So that's something that has happened to me. So I wish, like, if I could talk to the younger myself, I will say, raise your hand a little bit often and a little bit earlier. Don't wait until you feel that you are ready, because you're going to be waiting perhaps too long. For also another how to the younger ourselves out there, you need to keep a record of what things you have done, because by the time that you're in front of that promotion or in front of that job that you really like, you just get forget everything that you have done in the past that you can bring to that job. So a good tip is to keep a record of things that you felt proud that you did, maybe in another job, maybe if it's in another side of the, not exactly like when we talk, maybe you were not in sales, but you were dealing with existing customers, or you were solving problems in a different way. All those experiences translate to the job. So having that record is good to prove not only yourself, because the first person you have to convince is yourself that you are ready for the position, but also it will help you to convince the recruiter or convince your managers that you are ready for this next step.
Yeah, awesome. I really like the 3 points you have made. One is to put your hands forward, like all our panelists have said. The second thing is feedback. Once you put your hands forward and you're told no is not that bad. If we pay attention to the feedback that we are given, obviously take aside the emotions, because saying no, it can be very frustrating. Rejection can be sad, but just taking out the emotions out of it and listening to what you get from the feedback can actually help you develop. And thirdly, I like the one you talked about, the performance. Oftentimes we deliver results, we go through one project to the other, we don't take the time to reflect on our results. And hence why when we go into performance reviews with our managers, or when we go to the next job, it's hard for us to articulate our results, our achievements, and again, that's where once you can promote yourself, how can someone else, speak about it? So I really love that point. Apologies, don't know why I muted myself there. So I'm gonna come back to you, Jane. What can leaders do today to create a more inclusive environment that fosters gender equality in the workplace, especially in tech? Maybe you can touch on the qualities of inclusive leadership, because I know we've talked about it, like so many talks about inclusion everywhere. What does that really mean? What are the attributes of an inclusive leader? How can we identify that one is really a successful inclusive leader?
I would love to answer that. By the way, Corey, I loved your story. Thank you for sharing. I've stolen that line, like in terms of the difference between a coach and mentor and a sponsor. I love the way she explained it. But I saw a question in the chat box. Someone was asking about imposter syndrome. Indulge me, Adima, please, if I can just say something, because I could relate with it. And, for some of us that might know what it is, it's just, that feeling of being inadequate, especially when you're in rooms where you don't see people like you, or you feel underrepresented. I had a similar experience. So I'd gone for a program as a board training, and it was at Yale. And I found out in the first 2 days, I couldn't say anything in the class. Then I was in the washroom one of those days having a conversation with my mom. She's like, okay, so you're going for this training. Who is there? Who are any of your friends? I said, no. Anyone from Nigeria? I said, no. And she kept going. Anyone from Africa? I said, only other one lady. She was shocked. She's like, so all those 30-something women, nobody looks like you. I'm like, yeah. And I think that's when it dawned on me that I was going through imposter syndrome. I was struggling to even speak in class. And I wanted to share some of the things that helped me. One of the things I did, I think that broke that, was to speak to someone you trust. And sometimes when you do that, they hold that mirror and remind you of those skill sets you have, what makes you unique. Some of the things you have ignored because you're not looking at yourself, you're looking at others. And that's one of the things I did. I was speaking to a coach the third day in the morning before I went for the session, and she did that for me. And something else you could also do is I have now learned to accept compliments. I used to shy away from it, but I've learned to accept those positive messages. You need them in such tough times, like when I get all these tiny Post-it notes or cards, or, oh, you did this, it was amazing, I love this about your skill set, you're good. I keep them, because in those moments when I start to doubt myself, sometimes they become the reminders. I just thought I should share that, by the way. Adima, sorry that I
No, that's perfectly fine. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to keep an eye now more in the comments to get questions.
Yeah.
I do know somebody just asked a question that says, did any of you ever feel like you had to prove your ability to do your job, or feel like you weren't taken seriously? So I think that's something we've echoed on. I will leave that question for Corey to answer. So maybe you just go ahead and answer the inclusive leadership question.
So for inclusive leadership, I like to paint inclusion in a way that I love to see it, because it makes it visual. Like, diversity is us really saying we want, everybody come to the dance. And inclusion is actually, for me, actually asking people to dance, because you could come to the dance, like I said, everybody saying, come to the table, come to the table. You can show up and then there's no seat for you. Inclusion is really, for me, creating that psychological safety, so that diverse team, especially the minorities within the team, feel safe enough. Think about it as a dance, to dance. Literally asking them, can I dance with you? May I have this dance with you? And I think for leaders, it's so important, because you become almost like the compass for the team. You should be able to always gauge the temperature of the team. You're trying to find out, are people feeling part of the team? You're speaking to them, you're making observations as well. And once you see that, because most times, even though they're going through that, like I said, they might not want to share with you. You know, people can be in a certain situation where, like I said, you don't want to talk. You know, you show up in the meeting, you're quiet, and the meeting ends over. You show up again, you're quiet, you don't say anything. And you know, maybe people with more extroverted personalities are going at it, and the introverted personalities seem that they're not participating. I think for us as leaders to create that inclusion, because you've observed, you can now take a step and say, hey, I would like to hear from, for example, Jane. Jane hasn't said anything. Let's go around the room and make sure. And I had leaders do that for me. And that was so powerful, because once somebody does that for you, you just feel empowered to do it for yourself next time. So I think it's really important for leaders to show up when it comes to that. Pay more attention and take action. It could be by observing, but really by spending time with the team. Because by doing that, we're actually empowering those team members to feel more confident, to feel like they're part of the team, because that's what we really want. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that, Edima. Anybody that wants to add, feel free.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, it's all about listening, which is a very key component of leadership. And I think we've talked about, the unconscious bias. Sometimes you would see something being done to you, and I think it's echoed around the panel, but you're unsure until somebody speaks out. I think another thing we've talked about, speaking out and listening. Speak out when you see or you feel something, or speak out with facts, which is your data, like Jen said, so people don't feel like you're pointing fingers at them or trying to create some drama. So I'm going to come to Corey there. There's a question here we have from Uchechi. I apologize if I didn't pronounce the name right. It said, did you, like Corey, I'm going to point that to you, ever feel like you had to prove your ability to do your job, or you were ever taken on seriously? And how did you handle that situation?
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's such a good question, because I mean, I feel like that every day, and actually, I mean, Jane, you put it so simply with that 5 to 1. Well, guess what? When you're that one and you're that other, there's already attention on you in ways that you may or may not realize it, and in ways that may be helpful and may be detrimental. And the fact that you've got to prove yourself with that additional scrutiny. And yeah, I feel that all the time, and I think probably everyone here definitely feels that. In terms of being taken seriously, yeah. I mean, I've seen that as well. And actually, in my previous job, I was in a coaching conversation with my career counselor. So this was someone who is, responsible to help me grow and progress in my career. My partner works in the same industry and is known to a lot of people that I work with. And basically, my career coach turned around to me and said something that basically implied, yeah, but your career doesn't matter because, you can always fall back on your partner. And I was astounded. I mean, really, and at that point, it was like 2015. I was like, aren't we past this? It's like my career matters because it's important to me. And it has nothing to do with supporting my family and, all of these sort of traditional gender dynamics and all of that. And I just couldn't believe. And then that really rattled me, because this is the person that's responsible. I mean, I'm responsible for my progression and development, but this is the person that's kind of looking after me in that pastoral care sense. And it was just like, if they don't think my career is serious, I'm in trouble. And so it's just, yeah, it still happens, sadly.
Wow, that was so authentic and so honest. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. But I just had to say that. So in situations like that, what can we do, or how did you change your mindset? Because, for me, for a young person, especially when you have somebody you look up to say something like that to you, unless you're mature enough, unless you have, a certain set of mindset, that can do certain damages that I don't know what it would be. So how can we flip, such situation?
Yeah, I wish there was an elegant answer to this. And I think this is kind of bringing back to why these forums are important, why it's important to share these experiences, why it's important to build diverse teams, why it's important to bring in all of these different perspectives. Because I think the more awareness we have of these things, and the more we're able to call out unconscious bias. And to be fair, so this career counselor of mine is an outstanding individual. It was just his unconscious bias that he had a family in a very traditional environment where 4 children at home and they were all homeschooled, and that worked very well for his family, but it was his bias that was kind of being applied on top of my life. And and I think the more we call this out and the more we use our platforms to call out, and Jane, on your call to action, that was very much mine, is just like, always call this out. And the more we make the space to call that out, the more people feel comfortable calling that out, the more awareness we build, and it just becomes a really virtuous cycle.
Yeah, I love that. I think key point is the psychological safety, where you can share that. And this is what you can get again from an authentic mentor relationship. I'm an African, we like to use proverbs. So we do say things like, problem shared, is half solved, but I believe that a problem shared with the right person, because you can sit and talk to somebody who literally cannot solve your issue after 2 hours, and then you'll be like, what the heck did I just spend 2 hours of my time doing? So having authentic relationships with mentors, and it's very helpful with sponsors, having, just like you mentioned mentors. Now I'm just going to piggyback and ask you, do you think one mentorship, or you have a board of mentors? So when you find yourself in a situation like that, you can bounce your opinion, with others. Corinne, what do you?
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick on this one. I have a number of soapboxes, and when I hit that sort of like 15 years in my career, I started looking up. You look for these mentors all the way along of who can I aspire to, who does all the things that I can model myself after and be a happy, successful, fulfilled human being. And after about 10, 15 years in technology, I started looking up, and that crowd started getting very thin. And I couldn't find like that one person, or I couldn't even find anyone in some cases. And actually, I started realizing that the best thing for me from a mentoring perspective is I kind of pull pieces like a little magpie. I like the way so-and-so deals with difficult customer situations. I like the business acumen that someone brings to a conversation. I like the authenticity and the well-being that someone brings to a group. And you start pulling those little behaviors, and I've found it much more effective than trying to find like that one person that I can model myself after.
Yeah, I completely agree. Picking bits of advices from different people just helps, instead of having one person to talk to. So I'm gonna come to you, Lumna. So we have a question here in the chat from Juliet. She's been struggling to get jobs, interviews, and callbacks. Or are there recommendations that you would help? I'm asking this because I wanted to, piggyback to ask you, how can women maintain visibility, in the world of today? How can you put yourself, or should I say raise your profile when you're seen and you're also heard as well?
Yeah, so I would say mainly 2 things. I mean, for me, network is extremely important, because and that goes back to what Corey was saying. Actually, is the difference between mentor, a coach, and a sponsor. I never thought about a sponsor, and that's definitely on my to-do list starting tomorrow. And actually, for me, if I look at all of the different roles that I had, most of them came from my network, letting me know about a great opportunities that is a good match for me. Either internal or other external opportunity that are not always work related. So I would say, obviously, LinkedIn is a good platform. However, when you're just starting your career, it's very difficult to build a network out of the blue. So I think what is really helpful is to rely on groups like this one, but looking at groups like Girls in Tech, for instance, they often do meetups, they often do webinars, and that's a great way to connect with, different ladies within the same industry or in the same stage in your career. So I would say, yeah, network for me is probably top of mind. And I forgot the other part of the question, sorry.
To maintain visibility, be seen and be heard, not just about job searching, but ideally, how can you raise your profile? Because
yeah,
are looking at you, they're looking at your profile. So I think essentially that's where this person is struggling with.
Yeah, so in terms of raising a profile, I think that's also something that generally women are not really good at, because when we do something good, we're too modest to advertise it. And one of the key advice that I had as well along in the different roles that I had is, if no one knows about it, it doesn't exist. So you can do all of the great world, have the best invention. If no one knows about it, it doesn't exist. And I think, we need to be proud of all of the achievement that we have, no matter how small we think they might be. They will always be very big to another team, another organization, another person. So for me, what I do is with my manager, and even N+3, when we achieve a big project, sometimes it's individual project that are, again, outside of work, I make sure that I create visibility around it and that I advertise and build the Lubna brand. It sounds silly, but it is extremely important, because once again, and I cannot repeat it enough, if no one knows about it, it doesn't exist. So if no one knows about the great work that you've done, you cannot build your brand. If no one knows about your brand, that will very limit your possibility in the next step in your career. Hopefully that answers both sides of the question.
Yes, definitely. I completely agree. If people don't know, that's an area I struggle with as well. Speaking about my results and my achievements, but as I think, maybe, I don't know if it comes with age, or maybe I've been interacting with a lot of senior leaders, that now I feel confident to talk about my experience, my achievements. I'm going to come to you, Liliane. Would you share, another thing we've talked about, like representation and all that, and we're talking about visibility now. How can we increase this representation of women, and their achievement, whether individually like us, right, or speaking from organization like perspective as well?
Yeah, I think that we mentioned at the beginning, what are the actions that we're going to take? I think awareness and recognizing that we also can fall into the unconscious bias is one thing, but what are the actions that we are taking? So things that, for example, I'm very keen on, I have developed kind of like a sense of, every time that I talk about a programmer or a developer or something, and people are assuming that it's a he, I make sure that no, it's a she, or all that kind of a small thing that it might just don't be important, but if you point them out, they will start getting into the brains of everyone. Like you cannot stereotype that developers or programmers are always he. There are also many she's. Inclusion, for example, in the office or outside groups. So it's like also Jane said, everyone is invited to the dance, but I'm taking that step to go to that person that is sitting down, it is invited, maybe want to dance but doesn't dare to take that step. Well, I can go together and invite it to the dance. I'm doing also, I'm also taking that step myself. Sometimes you need that help of each other. So advocating with your peers, calling out definitely when you see something that is not giving the merit that it deserves. I can also share a story. Once at my previous company, we were involved in a very big project, and I remember that it was kind of common that people were putting out themselves out there. Well, we did this was the goals, this was what we achieved, this is the result, like everyone putting things just to put visibility. And we were involved in a project where it was co-hosted by a lady colleague and myself. And at the end, she sent a beautiful mail with everyone thanking everyone that participated, and sent it to everyone. But she didn't put herself. And I called her out right away. I say, you make a mistake. And she was so nervous, like, what, did I miss someone in my mail? Yes, the most important person, yourself. And she was, no, but I'm sending the email. And I say, it doesn't matter. Because if that mail gets forward to somebody else, whoever sends the email, no one is going to look at from who. It's just going to read the content. And it's these small things that we can do in our everyday that it will help us to have that visibility, not only for ourselves, but for our peers. That it will also help everyone that it is not correct to assume that a developer is always a he, or if someone is a manager is not, for example, something that happens also often, that is a manager cannot run a meeting, then he asks somebody else to run the meeting, and guess what? Maybe it is a male that is always being picked instead for a female. So those little things that are happening, we can take action to help to change how the things are done today, and hopefully will be just better and better.
Yes, I love how you brought back the action to us again, throwing it back at us, because we can talk about these things. It's not aliens that will come up to do it. We will be the one to implement the change that we need. Little by little, like you said, little things amounts to really big change. So I do have a question from Andrea here, but which I think we had already dealt with, but I'm going to just post it over to you, Jen. When you changed your career from an engineering background that you did talk about, did you feel like you didn't know anything? And how did you deal with that? Because this is a question from Andrea. She's talking about she constantly feels like she's not enough, doesn't know enough about a certain topic and doesn't have the certain experience to go off that. So maybe you could just throw maybe 30 seconds to run that. And
so Andrea, I feel you there, because I went through that as well. So think about it. I was a technical person. I've been doing all this, all about technical solutions and all that. Then I'm sitting in this sales meeting and people start talking about return on investment and business cases, ROI, total cost. I literally had no clue what they were talking about. So yeah, Andrea, I can feel you. But it's what you do about it, Some tricks I embedded along the way. And number one is, you try and educate yourself, isn't it? If it's possible to prep before a meeting, do that. If you have access to the agenda or whatever, you can do some investigation. So once you're in the meeting, you feel free to ask questions. And please, please, please try and ask at least one. There's a time I used to almost methodically make sure that within the first 10, 20 minutes, you do that, because once you don't do that, the longer you stay, the more your mind it starts hitting you. All those insecurities start holding you back. So if you could try, another way to do it is to buddy up. Buddying up helps, because when it's time to ask questions, they could help you. In terms of how you ask a question, you're not too sure. I'm not too sure about what you're talking about. Can you explain? Your buddy could reinforce it. And, you know, like, yeah, I would like to hear more about what you're saying. Jane is right. You know, that we use that lingo a lot, but what does it really mean? So those buddies can also help you if you do plan and buddy up with someone. But those are some of the tricks I was imbibing, you know, like, but if you can, just do the one of at least within the first 10 minutes. If you can prep and, you know, have a view of the agenda, find out what is going to be discussed, you might be able to ask one or two questions that can help you. I hope those little tricks help you.
Yes, I understand your answer, and I hope Andrea does, because you're saying to be inquisitive, ask questions, right? I always say you are only going to be foolish once. You're not going to know something once. Once you ask the question, now you know. So everybody that knows anything about anything, they didn't know anything at all. I know that sounds like a really tricky. So just
sorry, I wanted to add that also, you know, be kind to yourself. You know, it's good to recognize that you're also in a learning phase, which is one of the things I wish I did more, because the anxiety brings more anxiety actually. So, you know, please tell yourself if you need to, if you do the talking to yourself. I do the talking to myself. You know, when you go to the bathroom and you look into the mirror and you talk to yourself, and it's almost like giving yourself perspective. Some of these people have been doing this for years. You know, they've been in this or in that unit or doing that job function. They're aware of this. You are new, so you're coming in as someone that's willing to learn. So that growth mindset, that could help you frame it when you ask questions. So you're almost giving yourself permission to be curious when you're in those rooms, to ask those questions, no matter how stupid or foolish they are, because you've accepted that you're learning. That's your growth phase. Thanks, Fatima. Sorry, I wanted to clarify that.
Thank you so much. It's all about the mindset, being curious. I'm gonna come to you, Corey. There. So we've talked about, you know, bias and all. So how can we recognize bias behavior and have the confidence to speak up? Maybe you can also elaborate on allyship. I know sometimes when we say allyship, we always talk about the opposite gender. You know, an ally could be a fellow woman sitting just across to you. So maybe you could share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I will just throw a quick story out here, and I'll make it quick because I realize I think we're running a little bit long, and unfortunately I'm going to have to jump off here in a couple of minutes. But I touched on some of these topics already, but actually it's so important. Unconscious bias is just that, it's unconscious. And it's so important to have the awareness and have the diversity. And actually the story I think kind of most sort of accurately reflects it is sort of, and Liliana, you may know this as well from my Google new joiner onboarding. Someone shared in the early days of YouTube when they first started uploading videos straight from mobile. If the video was in portrait, it came in oriented the right way. If it was in landscape mode, 10% of the videos uploaded upside down, and the engineers pulled the code apart. Absolutely pulled the code. Like, it was perfect, no issues with it. Could not figure out why 10% of the videos, there was no left-handed engineers on the team. And right-handed people pull their phone out if they tilt it that way to record a video. Left-handed people pull it and go the other way. And it just goes to show you can have blind spots in absolutely anything. And the more diversity you put in the room, the less likely you are to have those blind spots. And the more likely you are, you know, the more you create these safe spaces to have these conversations, the more aware people become. And I think that's really the important part here. And allyship, you know, absolutely, you know, we need allies in the room. Where, you know, this is a Women's Day event where we're only 50% or 50+% of the population. Yeah, we need to have allies in the room.
Yes, awesome. Thanks so much, Kerry, for sharing that. That's really, you know, we can all have that bias, conscious or unconscious. So I'm sorry we've run out of time a whole lot. So I'm just gonna quickly go from Lumna to Lillian, then to you, Corey, and then to Jane. Final words of, should I say, inspiration. Think of your younger self or younger lady who is just lost probably doesn't know what direction to go with their career, their life, what advice would you say or would you give to them? Yeah.
So, so from my side, I think all of the things that I'm about to mention were mentioned several times during the talk, and with some very powerful examples already. But if I could look at my younger self, I would probably say three things. So, the first one was the importance of mentors, coaches, and now I want to add sponsors as well. I think if I look at my career, all of the acceleration in growth were made thanks to, very key and crucial advice I had when confronted with difficult situation or with a crucial decision. The second one is challenge yourself, put yourself in uncomfortable situation. It's always easy to stay and do the same role for forever, but you'll never get that excitement or that fulfillment. So put yourself in difficult situation. And the third one is fail fast and try again. I used to really avoid like the plague, anything where I was afraid of failing, and you just end up limiting your learning possibility. And it's okay to fail. It just makes you stronger. So those will be like my three key takeaways from today.
From my side, I can say that this is something actually I got advice early in my career and life, and it is never give up. If you have passion, if you have drive and you have goals, don't give up at the first obstacle. You look at the way to get your motivation and the way that you could get refuel to continue is look at everything that you have done in the past, whatever it is. Just making the decision that you're going to go for that goal, that's something that you really need to feel that proud of yourself. So don't give up. Look up, see your goals. If your path is being blocked, find a detour, find another way, find ways to overcome those obstacles, but always keep in mind your goal. And at the end of the day, it's actually the journey what is the most enjoyable part to reaching your goals. So it's okay to fail, learn from that. It's okay to find roadblockers. I think it would be very boring if you just get very straight line journey. It would be that exciting as if you had those challenges along the way.
Yeah, I love that you say that. So Corey, I'm just going to put this perspective because I had a question that said, do you ever feel like you're not creative? Maybe the person is works in the creative industry or so. I suppose it may be times where you don't feel motivated. What do you do? How do you build confidence? So maybe you can keep that question in mind when answering.
Yeah. I'll tell you. Tell you what. You teed this up really well. Because actually, I was going to kind of just echo what Jane had said around not being so hard on yourself that like you're in a learning phase. That actually. So if you're not creative enough, or you're feeling uncreative, like, we all go through ebbs and flows. We all go through waves of productivity and great ideas and creativity bursts. And then we have periods, we have fallow periods where actually you're not feeling as motivated, you're not feeling as inspired, you're not feeling creative. And just having a little bit of self-awareness and a little bit of grace, and extend that grace to yourself, that actually, it's okay. I may be going through a bit of an uncreative spell, but you'll come out the other side. And and it's that old adage of don't compare your journey to someone else's finished story.
That's really good. Don't compare your journey to someone else's finished story. Yeah, that's a really good one. You've given us a lot of Instagram quotes here, so we'll just be flying.
I clearly spend too much time on social media.
Over to you, Jen.
Yes, so final words, I'm going to keep it really short because a lot of people have said amazing things. Corey, Luna, Lillian, and I'm listening to you guys. I'm even taking notes. I'm like, yes, I love that. I'm going to just say something I saw. I used to have this mentor. When I go to his office to have chats, he had this poster at the door and it said, just do it. And I later found out it was the slogan for Nike. So I think for me, my takeaway for you, you've had so much. I'm sure you're all energized, inspired. You feel like, oh my God, I've got all those things. I think the real difference is doing it. And I think we've all said it in one way or the other. When Corey shared her experience of applying for that job, or when Luna shared her experience, the real difference is do it. Just do it. When you leave here today, is it that job, that interview, making those goals, finding that mentor, that coach, whatever it is, please just do it. And I just one little thing to the just do it. It's okay, do it scared. Like I don't think most of the things we did, like Corey was saying, nobody was like confident or like I've got it all figured out. Or, do it scared, do it afraid, shaking, crying. You don't know what you're doing, but still do it. Is in taking those baby steps, you can kind of get the confidence. So please just do it. Let's see some action. Do it. See you along the way, people. Thanks, Adema.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Very inspiring. Your career journey is very inspiring. The lessons that you've shared and key actions. If Audrey, can you just share the key takeaways? We'd like to know what your key takeaways are. And Maria is just going to share the results from our previous survey just to see what everybody said their one action would be.
All right. Let me share that. All right, this is going to take just a second. All right. Amazing. Can everyone see the answers on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, so one action says speak up, speak out, using questions, not dispute. That's awesome, really good. Don't be afraid to speak up. So I'll always remind myself with facts. And while I'm here, stand up. That's awesome. I see a lot of speak out. Could you scroll down, please, Maria? The other one says have an uncomfortable conversation, ask probing questions, ask for transparency in salaries, both men and women. Oh, that's a ground that is a bit shaky. Yeah. Be a great team player, be positive, confident in your skill, be enthusiastic about learning. Sorry. Yeah, could we just say the one word? There is the question about one word that people took. Go back up again to the very top. Yes, so there is the word cloud there, just at the second. So speak up, insightful, long road ahead. Yes, we've started, we are not there yet. Elevate others, change of mindset, yeah. Empowerment, always raise your hands, change is coming, hopeful, encouraging. So yeah, guys, this was really insightful. This was amazing. And great to hear from everyone. Thank you so much, Corey. Thanks so much, Lilian. Thank you, Lumna. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so very much. I know the panelists have mentioned a lot about mentorship, mentoring, coaching. I would love to share my story. I literally connected with one of the Blix mentor, I think 2 years ago. And my experience has been amazing. I was able to get a job, move from an industry that was non-techy to a very tech industry now, all because I was able to connect with mentors. So on Blix, we are very big about knowledge sharing, because what you don't know can kill you. I'm African, we can be very extra like that. So what you don't know literally can kill you. So, but then again, I love this about mentorship because it shortens your journey. It shortens your journey because you can learn from somebody. Like now we've learned from Corey's story, we've learned from Lubna's story, we've learned from Lillian, we've learned from Jen in a short session. But if you want to continue learning from senior leaders like them, is connecting with them. So we have them on blix.com. You can book sessions with them. It's completely free. these mentors just share their knowledge. The only motivation behind is your career success. They just want you to be successful, and I am, one of their success stories. So Blix.network, or email team@blix.network if you want to know more. So I'll hand over to Maria now. She's ready to tell us what we have coming up next. Okay, so here's how you can book mentoring session on Blix. So we have, if you go to blix.com/.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So,
thank you very much, Edema.
Oh.
So next, sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I think your screen is frozen.
Sorry. I think my connection is a bit lagging. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Awesome.
Okay, awesome. I apologize. All right. So next, in April 2022, we will be running a series of workshops around different topics in order to develop a sustainable career. So these are going to be on CV and interview tips, on negotiation skills, also some insights in performance review, and more. So stay tuned on our social media, especially LinkedIn, to be informed when we drop more information on the dates for these workshops. So as Edma said, in the meantime, if you want to visit the website to discover our great mentors and other insights we have, feel free to do so. And I want to thank everyone for your participation. Thank you, Jane, for the amazing keynote. And thank you everyone on the panel for taking the time to share your insights. It was really insightful. Thank you everyone for joining. It was great. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy your evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.